Good afternoon, everyone. It's gone 4 o'clock, so I'd like to welcome you all to the Storm Recovery webinar. Now, we'll do a little bit of housekeeping first. I'm Dean Hefford, I'm one of the recovery managers, and I have Marianne Aitken, the other recovery manager, with me, and we have Gina Ferguson, who's going to talk to us about placarding a bit later on in the presentation. We have a number of different rooms operating here at Council. This is to allow you to actually have a better view of who's actually presenting, and that'll make it easier for you to understand who's talking. Now, this is a webinar. That means your screens are off, chat is off, and what we'd like to offer is questions can be sent to us via the email addresses that you should be all well aware of by now, which is recovery@marlborough.govt.nz for any general recovery matters, and for roading recovery matters, recovery@marlboroughroads.com. These will be repeated through the webinar. We're going to open up with Mayor Leggett saying a few words, and then we'll move into the presentation. Thank you, Mayor Leggett.
Yeah, thanks, Dean. John Leggett here. Look, I probably wouldn't hurt if we just went round our room here and then perhaps where Richard and Steve are, just by way of introduction, so we all know who's here and who's going to be speaking. So, Nadine.
Yeah, good afternoon, everybody. It's Nadine Taylor here. I'm one of your 3 Sounds Ward councillors, along with Councillor Falls and Councillor Oddie, and I'm also the Deputy Mayor here.
Hi everyone, I'm Mark Wheeler, I'm Chief Executive of Council, and I'll be speaking later.
Kia ora, I'm Neil Henry, Manager of Economic Development and Strategic Planning at Marlborough District Council.
Hello everyone, I'm Richard Conningham, I'm the Manager of the Assets and Services Department for Council, and working with Steve Murren on roading recovery.
Yes, Steve Murren, Marlborough Roads Manager.
Yeah, thank you for that. Look, just as we get underway today, look, I'm only in the role as Mayor through till about the 8th of October, but it's very important to me that I'm part of this early work as we get underway for this. It's going to be a big part of Council's role over the next 3 years, so I'm very pleased to be here to at least be part of kicking it off. Look, the webinar was set up to really to share information and update everyone who has this ongoing interest around the issues we're facing following those flood events. And I think it's really important that the information is available to everybody, and the data that goes out to the communities is consistent. And I think it's really important that the information is on the record. We want to make sure that the information that you get is consistent and can be used by everybody. Look, in the past few weeks, I've had a lot of emails and conversations with members of our community around the local roads and the issues we've had over the past couple of months. Look, the views are diverse, and that's not surprising. There are people that are not directly affected by these roading issues, and particularly in the Sounds area, and they really have no interest in seeing a lot of money and expense and time spent on reinstating. There are others, of course, directly affected, and there's the farming community in the Marlborough Sounds, business owners, batch owners, permanent residents. They have a different view. They want a reliable roading access to their properties. And there's the middle of the road that'll accept some sort of lower level of service. But look, what it comes down to ultimately is costs of reinstatement, and there's a lot of work already been done by roading experts, by geotech engineers, and safety concerns is obviously paramount from a council point of view. We can't step away from that. That's got to be front and centre in the work that we undertake. The next issue, of course, is if there is going to be reinstatement or an improved level of service over time, then who pays? And that's once again going to be a big conversation. Whichever way this heads, we will need government support. What the politicians are saying to us is that it's not only Marlborough that's going to need support. Northland, the east coast of the North Island, Coromandel, Ashburton, west coast, you name it. There's a big draw of money out to all the regions. I can say, in getting the Prime Minister here, the Minister for Emergency Management, McAnulty, he had 3 visits to the region. We had the Minister of Transport, Minister Wood, here. So what I can say is that I've got a really close understanding and on-the-ground understanding of some of the damage that we've suffered here in Marlborough. So we've done really well there, and I think to their credit, Minister McAnulty in particular, those 3 visits, he had a really good look around the region. The Prime Minister, when we got back to Woodburn, the first comment she made to me was that she didn't realise how many houses, residents lived down the Kenepuru Road. So it's that sort of information that they're always storing in the back of their mind when we're talking about what sort of funding that they're going to give to the recovery. So I'm pleased about that. Enough from me. I think it's important today that we get as much data, share as much information as we can. So I'll hand over to Mark Wheeler just to give an overview and some direction as to where we're heading.
So I'll just give a very quick overview of the event because you are living it and you're obviously pretty aware of what's happened, but this is a broad overview. So Mary Ann, I think we're going to share a screen there somehow. And we'll move through to the 3rd slide. That's it. Right, so this graph here hopefully shows you in a fairly dramatic way the extent of rainfall that we suffered over. Most of the rainfall fell over about 3 days. So on the left there, you'll see Tunakino, and the orange bar there is the amount of rain that fell in August. Now, there's 1239 millimetres fell in August. 1,000 of those millimetres fell in 3 days. The green bar is the previous maximum recorded August rainfall for Tunakino. So we had 2.5 times that almost in the space of a few days. The blue bar is the August average. So on the right there, you'll see the same sort of information for the Rye at Rye Falls. So it was an incredibly severe rainfall event, particularly in that area of the Sounds. So that was bad enough, but it came on top of a record July rainfall. And when you've had significant rainfall for some time, for some weeks, as we did have in July, the ground's saturated. Any extra rain that comes down just runs off immediately, and you get severe erosion damage. And that's why we had a significant number of slips. And Marlborough Roads will explain how many faults the roads have suffered and quantities of mud and debris. The rain has nowhere to go. So these are the storm outcomes. You're probably aware of those, but I'll skip over them. Gina will cover the red or yellow stickered houses later on, but there are over 90 identified, and we sympathise with people. It's a very difficult situation to find yourself in. We had massive road damage, especially in the Marlborough Sounds. State Highway 6 and State Highway 63 were closed, as well as multiple local roads, and many of which are still closed. The Rye River had a record flood. There was extensive land damage in that area. We also had a large Wairau flood, and our rivers engineers are working on repairs there. There's actually more damage this year than there was last year, but they're making good progress on that. And they're also talking to people in Wairau Valley and Renwick about how we can improve their flood protection in the future. We also had 3 water service damage and overflows, and there are many drainage issues. Today we're going to focus on the Sounds, however, because that's where the worst damage has occurred, and we don't have sufficient time in an hour to cover all the multitude of other issues that we're dealing with at the moment. So we're focusing on the sounds. So I'll hand over to Dean and Marianne now to talk about the recovery process.
Thanks, Mark. And I think what you also should point out is that we're not even 13 months from July 21 when we had our other severe weather event, which caused a significant amount of damage, and we hadn't even got halfway through recovering from that. So sort of adds insult to injury. I'm just going to go over quickly what we've got in place for the short and medium term for the recovery. And I know that everyone's waiting to hear roading, so we won't take too long on that. I don't have fancy slides, I'm just going to talk to you. So we'll put a transcript and notes of this meeting out after the end of the meeting, so that those that can't get to it, or if you want to review it, it'll be available. So the key thing is that we got up early, and we got all of the things up early that we did last year. And I think we're probably 6 to 8 weeks ahead of where we were last year. Which I think is really great. Unfortunately, we've had the experience to know what to do this time, and we've had great support from our contractors and transport suppliers, especially into the Sounds, but also into the Rye Valley and the side valleys there that needed support. So in terms of transport and coordination of transport, we've got barges and water taxis back on, heavily subsidised by Waka Kotahi. We've also included food deliveries this time, because knowing that people don't necessarily have access to get out to get food and medical supplies. We've had really good coordination from local communities to access these services. We know there's some tweaks that need to be made. We really want to review some of the options for the further and outer Sounds because of the distances. The per head subsidy, especially on the water taxis, is not very much towards that. So we're working with the suppliers and Waka Kotahi to increase the subsidy for those longer distances. We're also looking at potentially, as demand grows, looking at scheduled runs, so that we will actually pay to have a run going through at better times than some of the runs are now. So that will help people get into town and do their medical appointments and all the things that you want to do in town. Plus also looking at potentially having transport options once you get to Havelock or Picton to actually get into Blenheim and do other things around there. So we're working hard on that. We're also looking at potentially more sites for medium term for some barge entry into the Sounds to help some of those transport issues, especially for the farming community. So part of that support is looking at residents, farming community, working very hard with iwi, especially around Durban Island, and also looking at the businesses that need support in there. Part of that is the psychosocial support that we want people to do, and I understand earlier this week there was a great meeting of farmers in the Rye Valley, I think. They got together and talked about common issues and the way that they needed support, and also got to sign up for Enhanced Task Force Green, which I'll talk about a bit later on. We're aware of the rubbish issues, and we keep getting lots of requests for skips and things that we'll put around the Sounds. The temporary accommodation service is available as previously. We've also got our recovery navigator Charlotte Wood back on board, and we're looking at potentially getting another navigator to help her because of the sheer volume of what she's dealing with. We've also got a really good partnership still in place with all the common agencies you'd expect us to be partnering with. So it's really good to have those people back around the table and ready to go and help us. One of the key things I think is with the PHO and the health options, especially for medicine delivery, and looking at transport options to get people to those medical appointments, and also for any emergency services that are required to get people in and out. I think have you got Gina's slide up? Gina's just going to go quickly over the placard system and what it means, and then I'll follow through with some other items of what we've got underway.
Sure. Right. So immediately post the flooding event and in the following weeks, building control officers accompanied by USAR personnel and geotechnical engineers undertook rapid assessment inspections of buildings in affected areas. The purpose of these inspections is to respond to the risk of buildings to people that's resulted from the event. A coloured placard system is used to identify buildings at risk. Where possible, the placard is fixed directly to the buildings. A red placard means the building is at high risk, so that means it's prohibited from entry. A yellow placard is for moderate risk buildings and identifies restrictions of use or access to parts of the building, and that could be specific to the individual building and the property. A white placard means the buildings may be occupied as it is low risk, but they may have suffered some damage. To date, there are 33 buildings that have received red placards, 65 yellow and 25 white. Further buildings may receive placards as officers continue assessments. The vast majority of placards have been issued as a result of geotechnical risk rather than flooding risk. Property owners with placards have been sent information specific to the properties, explaining what the placards mean and what the next steps are for them to either have those placards reviewed or removed from their properties. And this may require, for example, repair works to be completed or geotechnical advice to be provided. If anyone who has a query regarding the placarding of a building on their property, they should contact Council's Building Control Group.
Thanks, Gina. Thanks for that, Gina. A couple of things that are already in place, which I think are really positive, is Enhanced Task Force Green is actually in the field and has been in the field since Monday. So we've got one group over here in Marlborough and one over in Tasman Nelson. And if those of you that remember, last time it took us about 2 months to get that in place. So actually having those people up and running now is a real boon to start getting those farms tidied up. Also, the Mineral Relief Fund has its first meeting on Monday. I think we've got 26 applications at the moment, so it's good to get that underway and access that funding that's been provided to us by the government, and also some other generosity from organisations and individuals that have put money into that fund to help out people in Marlborough. What we'd really like to know is also through the short to medium term recovery is what's working and what's not. We'd rather you told us 10 times that something's not working, and also you can tell us what is working, which would be nice, because that way we can fix it. If you don't tell us about these things, we can't change things, we can't adjust things and make it work better for you. And also, I think we must realise that a month in, all the easy stuff's been done. We're now getting onto the gnarly stuff, the stuff that's complex, it's going to take a bit of toing and froing to get things worked out. That's especially for the farming and business communities out in the Sounds, because we know there's some real issues with on-farm supplies and even just getting access to the water points in terms of the barge sites to get those materials in. So I know that Steve and Richard are going to be going over some of those issues in their presentation coming up. What we do want to do is get out and have those face-to-face meetings. They're really important, and you gave us that feedback last time. But if we can't do face-to-face meetings, we're happy to have Zoom meetings or Teams meetings with smaller groups and discrete parts of the community, so we can help solve your immediate issues in your own communities. Really keen for you to sign up to use the emails to let us know what's happening for roading and recovery. Remember, Council's Antenno application, really good because you only need a phone. You don't necessarily need an internet connection to use it. It can connect you up and you can choose which things you get. Looking at our website, and also if the worst comes to the worst, we can use snail mail. And I've been assured by New Zealand Post that you will get your voting documents. But if you don't, let me know. That's all I had for now. Quite happy to hand over to Richard and Steve now with the big issue, which is roading.
Thanks, Dan. Right, here we go on roading. We'll just wait for Marianne to bring up the slides. Okay, so I think just about everybody's seen that photo of Ronga Road and the house that came down the hill, just as an opening there. If we move on to the next slide, please, Marianne. Just a way of background, just wanted to give you an update on what had occurred since the July 21 flood. rain event. And there'll be some comparisons between this and what's occurred in August of this year. So we did have 1,648 faults that were recorded. 1,349 were completed as at the 31st of July before the rain event occurred. There were just under 300 that were left. Of those, there were 83 which were complex sites. A lot of those that were left were in the Kinapuru Road, Queen Charlotte Drive area in terms of the complex ones. If we move on to the next slide, please, Marianne. There was talk about funding earlier on. Some will, we'll just go back one slide. Yeah. Some will recall that last year after the July event, we received approval for funding from Waka Kotahi to fund our recovery for the July event, 21 event at $85 million at 95%. As at today, there's approximately $40 million of that funding remaining. Because of the gravity of the August event, we've made an application to Waka Kotahi to have that funding reallocated so that we can address the August issues, because it does take quite a bit of time in terms of any new applications to be approved with Waka Kotahi, and obviously with the other events that have occurred around the country, they're having to evaluate applications from a number of different regions within the country. We're aiming on focusing on essential services access where possible, and achieving public access, and then trying to get truck access as well on priority routes. And Steve will go through what those priority routes are that have been identified. And we'll continue on the 2021 damaged sites that are in those new priority routes that have been identified. If we move on to the next slide. Just a comparison for you of July 21 versus August. We've got a map up there to give you a sort of pictorial version of what's occurred. Just by way of comparison also, you can see that July 21, 1,648 faults, they took 6 months to identify. We're just under a month or 4 weeks in after the August 22 event. The number's 3,248, but as we've been talking, Steve's received another update, and that's now up to 3,370. So that number's still moving. And you can see by the number of dots on there just how hard the Sounds was hit in particular versus Southern Marlborough, which was the July 21 event. If we move on to the next slide, please. A bit of a breakdown there, comparing the faults between last year and this year. Again, just pointing out to you those Sounds areas of the Kinapuru and Queen Charlotte. That's okay, but it's got some pretty major ones this time around. And Polaris and French Pass as well. It's had quite a significant hit this time compared to last year. Now, if we just move on, please. There's been some questions around insurance cover and emergency access if you're driving on roads. We've received some advice from the Insurance Council, which we're wanting to inform you of. And look, I'll just read it out, even though it's written up there, that they have a definition of closed road limited access. And basically their motor policies typically provide on-road cover anywhere in New Zealand, and drivers should check if their insurer covers what could be considered off-road driving. And motor policies do not cover reckless acts if anybody's being silly. We've reviewed, and Steve will go through in a bit more detail on those priority roads and the roads that are closed. Kinapuru Road from Motapu Bay Road through to the Heads, and the last 3 kilometres of French Pass Road, council at this stage is classing as a fully closed road. We don't have enough information to confirm if these roads are safe enough yet. Geotech engineers have been out on site today for that Kinapuru Roads section, and we should get some analysis on that early next week to make a more informed call. All of the other roads that are closed, and you'll see there's a web link below that you can refer to on the council website, we're classing as closed road, limited access to allow residents access to those houses on the other closed roads. So if we could move on to the next slide. I'm going to hand over to Steve now, who's going to talk about barge sites, and he'll have a few photos to talk through, as well as talking about those priority roads that we've identified.
Yeah, thanks, Richard. As you're all aware, access on Kennebrua Road is not available, so there is some priority work that we're going to be undertaking on the barge site. So the Toria Bay barge ramp is to be extended so it caters for all tides. Fish Bay barge ramp is to be extended 10 to 15 metres, so that is usable at low tide. Unfortunately, Waka Bay jetty has been damaged by a deep-seated slip and is to be closed. Next slide. That's just really a photo that shows you what's happened at Waka Bay. You can see in that top photo, there's a crack just below the waterline. And from about the third pile out, that whole front of the wharf has moved forward. Yeah, the bottom photo shows in a bit more detail. So as structural engineers have advised that we need to close that jetty, and that should have been happening today. Next slide, thanks. So we had a bit of discussion already about the priority roads. So this map shows what we've deemed as priority roads. So the intention is the roads in green are to be restored to public access as soon as we can. The roads in red are still to be determined if restoring access is first possible, and if it is, to what level of service we will restore those roads. Next slide, thanks. So this is just the roads we've deemed as priority roads. So we've got Queen Charlotte Drive, French Pass, except the last 3K just before the township where we got some major geotechnical issues, the Awatere Valley Road, the Waihope Valley Road, North Bank, Port Underwood Road, Opuri Road, and the Kennebrua. The priorities are Queen Charlotte, Kennebrua Road from Queen Charlotte Drive around to Motapa Bay intersection, Fish Bay barge ramp to the Kennebrua heads, and then the Toria Bay or Toria barge ramp again to the Kennebrua heads. We've also got ongoing maintenance activities still happening in the outer sound. So next week, a rock buster and gravel spreading will be operating on the Titirangi and Anakoa roads once we've got the slips out of the way. And a general inspection programming and of seasonal maintenance activities is still to be ongoing. Next slide, thanks. So it's just going to take you through a few photos and just shows exactly what some of the damages that's happened out there. So this is of Queen Charlotte Drive. Damage on Queen Charlotte Drive between Linkwater and Havelock hasn't been too bad, but there's particularly bad damage between Aussie Bay and Picton, and we're still working there even to gain access through. And the way that's going, that's probably going to be at least a month before we actually get an access through Queen Charlotte Drive to Picton. Next slide. Yeah, this is just a photo of one of the slips that we're dealing with in that section between Nakuta and Picton. Next slide. This shows the substantial damage that we got at the French Pass settlement. You see that quite clearly there's some massive slips that have come down from way up the top of the ridge, completely engulfed the road, hit the house there in the middle of the photo. Next slide, thanks. This just really highlights some of the damage we've had in the Kennebrua Road. This is above Tumahea Lodge. Some major underslips on the Kennebrua Road that have come right down onto the Tumahea Road, and then the one on the left has actually gone right down up against Tumahea Lodge. This shows a large global failure on the Kennebrua Road at Tara Bay. As you can see, the road is slumped there by about 600 millimetres. This slump is around 150 metres long. And there's 6 houses within this slump that are also moving down the hill, and the whole thing's dropped between 600 mils and a metre. So very hard to fix something like that. Next slide, please. This just shows you the typical sort of sidecast failures that we were seeing out in the sounds. This is on Duncan Bay Road, Tennyson Inlet. Similarly, Tennyson Inlet, this is on Archers Road again, failure of the sidecast material on the edge of the road. Port Underwood Road, this is a major underslip. It's taken half the road out and gone right to the water. Another very difficult one to repair. And this is one of the issues we're facing in the Puri Road. The river's cut in there and scoured a good section of the road out. We have managed to restore access through there, but yeah, to put that road back to a 2-lane road like it was before, hugely expensive. So that was really just a summary from the roading team. We'll let the others carry on.
Right, so we're now going to talk about the difference between short-term recovery work, which Dean has covered, and the longer-term plan that we believe is necessary to deal with the extent of the challenge we've got in front of us. Next slide, please, Marianne. Thank you. Yes, so there's a short and medium-term plan and then a longer-term plan that we need to undertake. The long-term recovery needs a strategic plan, and first we've got to respond to the damage assessment, and then we've got to consider long-term, the extent of long-term repairs to roads and levels of service that we can provide. And it's not only roads that might be affected, it's obviously housing, and it's obviously other infrastructure that also could be damaged as a result of this event, or may be damaged in the future, because we have got impacts like climate change to deal with, where we expect to have far more of these sorts of events, unfortunately, in the future. So we do have to face up to the realities of climate change and the financial sustainability of having these sort of events more regularly. So our initial focus is on roads and their resilience to climate change, and obviously roads are extremely important to communities for access. Pre-2021, the average Kenepuru road costs were more than double the rates collected, and that's been accepted over the years, and the deficit's been funded by other areas of Marlborough. But then in 2021, as we've already said, we had $85 million of damage. And then this year, it's expected that there's several $100 million worth of damage required if we're to fully restore the roads from this 2022 event. And that's still got to be confirmed. There's a lot more assessment work needed, but the initial assessments are that there's several $100 million worth of funding required. We were very fortunate that in 2021, Waka Kotahi provided that 95% assistance, and there is a balance remaining. They've indicated that they will support allocating that balance towards those priority access routes that Steve set out before, and that they will fund barge and water taxi subsidies during the recovery phase. We're hoping that's for at least 12 months. After that, Waka Kotahi's expecting us to undertake this sort of planning work, and we'll have to work closely with them and other government agencies, and hopefully they'll help us with funding this planning work before they'll determine how much they put into future levels of service and future recovery events. So we need to demonstrate, as I said before, that the roads can be resilient and financially sustainable. If they're not considered resilient and sustainable, is marine transport viable? We know it is in some areas. We know that it can be provided. Is it viable? Some people won't be able to access wharves, jetties and barge sites. So what are the economic impacts if we can't provide that? So all that means that we really want to be able to provide road access, but in some areas, maybe that has to be of a reduced level of service just to be affordable. So those are the sort of we've got to work through processes, bring the community along with us as we head towards decision making with government on these big issues. Government agencies and the funding will be key. and there's a lot of investigation, engagement, consultation required before any final decisions can be made. And I want to stress that there's already talk out there about that we've made our minds up. We haven't, we can't. This has to be done with the community, it has to be done with government, and we have to have all the facts before we can make informed decisions and look to make informed decisions. So we've started creating a framework for this long-term recovery plan, and I'll hand over to Neil now, who's going to project manage this process.
Thanks, Mark. Whilst the short-term and medium-term recovery work is taking place, and we've already heard today about the priorities that we've established that we need to work on, we need to carry on working in the background on a long-term recovery plan, because of course not only do we have to recover from this event, we don't know when and where future events will take place. So this is a wider looking plan around what does recovery look like from this event, what are the risks around for future events. So this slide and the slides coming after this will kind of give you an outline of the things we're thinking about at the moment. We're still scoping this piece of work, but what we do know is we're looking for multidisciplinary expertise that is available within New Zealand to try and look at some of the future risks that exist in that environment. So that will include, of course, climate change, which will not just look at what we know now, but in terms of the future. We've had 2 significant events in a very short period of time. We don't know when they'll happen, but of course it's both about intensity of storms as well as frequency of storms. So we'll try to get some indications as to what the risk profile looks like in terms of future events. We'll of course look at land stability, not just of the roads, but of the land surrounding the roads, where houses are, where other economic activities are taking place, and try and understand where the risks lay as we understand them, but also with information that council holds around what can we try and ascertain about future risks, knowing what we do about the terrain, the steepness of the slopes, and the soil type that we have there. This all is, of course, about safety. So is it safe for people to be able to travel within the sounds? Is it safe for people to be living in the sounds? As we all know, at certain times of year, we have a significantly higher population in the sounds, where should an event take place at that time, we have a significant response issue as well as a longer term recovery issue. So the information we're looking to gain will look at that. And as Mark said previously, of course, people live there, people operate businesses from there. We need to understand where the impacts are laying in terms of what happens in the future if access changes, if people are unable to use current road access in the future in order to be able to carry on doing business or living out there. So we need to try and measure that to help make a decision about what's the case for restoration, what's the case for alternative activities. Waka Kotahi, Marlborough roads, of course, we're looking specifically at the roads and at the engineering challenges around the roads. And of course, what the alternative transport options may be. We've talked about some today where some barge or water taxi sites may be able to go in. Of course, there's significant tidal issues in parts of the sounds that will impact on the type of infrastructure provided. But in the long run, this also means looking at the Marlborough Environment Plan about what should be enabled in the future in terms of future use as we learn more and more about the risks out there. And at the moment, things that are currently permitted, we'll need to look at that to see whether or not we can continue to enable things to take place, or whether there are some issues that people need to be aware of before increasing activity in certain places. And it doesn't just affect us, it affects Marlborough Lines, it affects the telecoms companies, it affects the barge providers and other key infrastructure out in the sound, so we need to involve them. But throughout all this, of course, it's stakeholders, so that includes particularly people who are living and operating in that environment. It includes council, it includes government, it includes iwi. So we need to create a plan that has as much input as possible from the people that have a say and opinion on what the current and future use of that space will be. Next slide, please, Marianne. This is a rough outline. There's a few slides here, so I won't go through every line here, but we're working now on a scoping of a piece of work to do that. We've already talked about the priority road repairs, so some of this work is already underway. We expect this piece of work to be reasonably expensive, and we're going to need assistance from central government to try and fund that. So those discussions have already started, but in order to be able to talk to them, we need to have an understanding of what the cost might be, so we know how much we need to request. So that piece of work is ongoing. We aim by the end of this year to have identified who can undertake the work and hopefully engage them to undertake the work. A key date for us, which is number 8 on the slide there, is our council's annual plan process for the following financial year, 2023-24, where should the council need to provide additional funding alongside hopefully a Waka Kotahi subsidy, we need to have some information there to try and understand what that cost will be so we can plan for it for the following year's budget. Next slide, please, Marianne. Into next year, this is where the main piece of work will take place. So I've already talked about the assessments we're looking to undertake. That will take some time. It involves bringing expertise into the region and getting out to parts of the Sounds, in particular, where there are issues that need to be assessed. And of course, stakeholder engagement will run throughout that. We are looking at, of course, recommendations to come from that piece of work, both about the long-term road reinstatement and other transportation options if road reinstatement isn't going to be feasible. And of course, should it not be, we don't know yet, as Mark said, there's no decisions have been made. There may be some properties where it isn't possible to restore access in any form. If that's the case, then we need to look at how we can work in future to try and assist those people to plan for the future. Next slide, please, Marianne. So that really, we expect 2023 to be a big year in that piece of work. And then we've called what follows that implementation pathway. So we'll need funding for whatever happens next. We'll need funding. So we need to talk to the people that are affected by that and government to see what funding is available to try and plan for this future that we've identified. There could be legal and regulatory responses. So, for example, I've talked about the environment plan. That will pick up the actions from this piece of work and identify what needs to change in terms of our future planning. There needs to be potentially policy changes both here and in other organisations around what we encourage, what we enable, what perhaps we can no longer enable to take place. Road building being the obvious one in terms of future actual physical development, and then talking to the other infrastructure providers around how does this affect them. So for example, if lines companies require currently road access to try and manage and maintain their assets, what will they do if that isn't available in the same way that it is at the moment? So it affects other people as well. And as I say, if we end up in a position where there are some properties that cannot be serviced, we need to work out a future with those people around what can that future look like. I think that's I'll have one more slide here. So in addition to the work with the consultants, of course, we need to develop a governance structure to oversee the project. You'll be aware we have a council election coming up in the next couple of weeks, so our own organisation will be changing in terms of governance. So as we get into the new year, we'll have a new council, and we need to appoint some consultants to do that, but also a number of stakeholders to try and consult with along the way. So I've listed a few there. That isn't a full list of those that would need to be done. Following that, the council has a number of requirements around how we consult on significant issues. Some things coming out of this could meet that test. So if we do, we need to consider what formal consultation process do we need to take place once we've got better information about the impacts of the event. I think that might be my last slide.
Yeah. So I'll hand back to Dean, actually.
Yeah, thanks, Neil and Mark. And there's some really big issues in there. Yeah, so there's going to be a long tail to this in terms of the consultation and how we proceed. Before I wrap up with some technical wind-ups and sharing of emails and the rest of it, I wonder, Mr. Mayor, if you'd like to make some closing comments.
Yes, I hope we're giving a really clear direction that we want to share as much information as we can, and that information is available to everybody. So everybody is able to be part of the conversation. And when it comes to decision making, of course, it's got to be based on consistent and reliable information. So that's a really key focus for us. The reference to the council website, I use it myself to get up-to-date information through. It's a really useful tool. So I'd encourage people to look at that. And of course, the meeting today is recorded and will be available on the website. This is the first of a number of meetings that are planned in the very near future. Thanks, Dan.
Thank you, Mr. Mayor. Before we finish, I'd just like to say personally that 13 months later from July 21, I didn't really want to be sitting here talking through this again. For those that are still affected by July last year and the wider community that's been affected by this latest series of events, not only August, but the 3 rain events we had in July this year as well. So hopefully we can continue on and keep improving in terms of the recovery that we do in short and medium term. We've had this as a webinar for obvious reasons that I stated at the beginning of the webinar. Too many people and too many specific areas that we learned from last time that need specific answers. So once again, if you can flick that on, if you've got any questions or queries from today, if it's general recovery, then it's recovery@marlborough.gov.nz. If it's roading specific recovery, recovery@marlboroughroads.com. Just a reminder that we do a recovery update every Friday. It's published onto the council website, also goes out on Antenno for those that want to pick it up. And also we'd love to hear from you if you'd like to have us meet face to face or have specific Zooms for your communities. That's the best way that we can find out what the specific issues are. And yeah, really, thanks very much for listening. We've already got some requests from the farming community to have specific issue meetings with them. I think we've got our Kiwi Bay have requested us to meet with them. So more than happy to come out and meet and talk through the issues and really get a sense of what's needed out there. So once again, thank you very much. I think we've got over 250 people logged into this session. We'll make the notes and other parts of the recording available next week. And again, if you've got any questions, please don't hesitate to contact us. And thank you, Mr. Mayor, for your opening and closing comments. We'll sign off for now and look forward to getting your emails. Thank you very much.